that is politics and violence. And of course, given what we're currently seeing, like I said earlier on, we're just a few months shy away from the general elections. And of course, right now, and especially on the pre-election phase, where there's realignments and realignments, taking place in the political sphere. So the biggest question that I'll start with you, Joy, is where does this all stem from? Like, do we always have to see a case of violence every electioneering period? Can't we just have peaceful elections?
We are maturing, we are getting there. We're not as bad as we used to be. But if you start talking origins, we have to go back to where we started as a nation.
That's true.
For us to even get our independence, it was a clamor, it was a struggle, it was a fight of us against the white person. And then we went ahead and organized into some political systems. The beginning stages of our political systems are also very acrimonious. And so violence was always the means of spurring the revolution. When you get to the end of the road, there's an uprising. There's the marches in the streets, there's the waving of the placards, there's all, I mean, growing up, I remember seeing all those scenes of, you see the politicians walking hand in hand, linking hands, and the people are behind them. So violence has always been a means of sort of making your voice heard when you feel you're not getting heard. That helped us to sort of change the face of Kenya. Get even the constitution that we have now. So we got into a space where we got used to associating violence with political activity. And it's almost as if when it's a political season, there is a spirit of violence that is released where people become uninhibited. Then there's a good old thing that we cannot discount of mob psychology. If you find yourself in a crowd and one person starts, hey, hey, the next thing you know is everybody, which is what we saw, like the clip on Forest Road for that lady.
That's true.
I mean, it was an incident with one person, but by the time it was done, it became an entire industry. So there is a certain socialization as a society that we have had that predisposes us to violence. But the one thing that we see is always a common factor. Like with every bomb, there's a detonator. There's the guy who sets it off. There's the fellow who finds the right spot to strike the match. Now, repeatedly, this has been a politician. So you'll find that there's somebody somewhere who will organize people and, you set the little fire hoping that it becomes the big one. And I think that's where now, like where some works, that's part of what they try to do, is try to find these detonators before they detonate and try and neutralize them. Because as a society, where we have reached now as a country, we no longer need violence. We've gotten to a place where if you speak, we hear you. Look at us now. We are on national television, and the people who are watching us, we don't have to meet to communicate. We are getting our messages across. So whereas once upon a time, you didn't know where you're going to find Moi to tell him what you thought, you had to create a big scene outside All Saints to get him heard. Right now, we can sit here and I can say, Mr. President, listen to me. And he will watch and he will listen to me.
Absolutely.
So we've changed.
We have come a long way. But then again, given what we're seeing now, right? And like I said, the campaigns are really, really heating up right now. I mean, aren't we scared that we will go back, like 50,000 steps back, to where we started from? And the fact that you're saying, listen, we are somewhat maturing up. And even listen to like the daily conversation. You'd hear a lot of Kenyans saying, listen, sisi tumechoka, hatutaki vita. But then again, there's still the same persons who go ahead and, participate in cases of violence. So is it more of a we problem, Sam, or is it more of the leaders' problems, and in this case, the politicians who are the detonators?
I think it's good to recognize the fact that as a country, we've made a lot of progress. We are one of the few countries in Africa that has had elections without violence, without coups. We've had them regularly. And also, for me, last week was a very good opportunity for Kenya to celebrate. For the first time, we had a Supreme Court ruling where there was no protestation. There was no bashing of the judiciary, judges, and that's a good indication of our maturation as a democracy. In terms of violence, there is always that tendency for people to use violence as a tool for political mobilization. And unfortunately for us as a country, it's so easy to encourage violence as a tool of political mobilization because our main nucleus for political campaign is the tribe or tribal identity.
Okay.
So people always recede back to their own cocoons because somebody is creating fear that another community is going to affect you or is... So that element of fear that is always generated against candidates is what makes communities to go back to themselves and say, we've got to defend ourselves. And then accompanied with the question of tribal identity is the question of blind trust. We have these dominant politicians, personalities who their supporters do not question even what they say or what they are planning to do or what they are saying about other communities. And because of that, we end up following them even when we know that they are leading us to the wrong path. As NCIC,
right?
as NCIC, we had a sitting in January to discuss just to look at the landscape and see where we are likely to experience this kind of violence. And unfortunately, there are many factors that make Kenya's elections to be prone to violence. Some of them, of course, are just places that have a history of political violence, where you have got these dominant personalities I've talked about that are able to mobilize their communities against others. Also places where you have got multiple identities in a county, for example. And all those things combined with the fact that we still have a challenge of criminal gangs who emerge during elections or are organized and so forth. So it is not that we are violent in nature as a people, but the organization of our politics is such that it creates conditions for us to use violence as a form of means of political mobilization. So you can't blame the politicians, you can't blame the citizens, because sometimes the citizens are the ones who even encourage the politician to speak in bad ways, because they clap for them, they chant.
It's like they encourage them to, yes.
So we all have to look at what needs to happen in terms of our values, in terms of our own self-discipline as a nation.
As a people.